That's really all I have today. I just wanted you to know where we're at with carp and what work we're doing and why we're doing it. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for you?
I got a question. Are you working with Alabama and Mississippi directly? So since we share waters there, or are you guys all working with U.S. Fish and Game as a group, and everybody pulling in the same direction right now?
Yeah, we're pulling in the same direction. I'm actually the Tennessee River representative for the bigger group that's the Mississippi Basin thing. So I represent their needs when I go to some of these meetings. But when we have our multi-state planning meetings, they participate. And when we issued that contract to Tennessee Tech, it was clear that they're not only to work in Tennessee water, they're to work in Pickwick Lake wherever it takes them. And they've been received by they've been welcomed by Mississippi and Alabama. Alabama is still they haven't been asking for a lot of resources yet, and that's a source of concern for me. Everybody needs as much resources as they can get. When they get more fish, I think they'll wake up. But yeah, it's been a really good relationship so far, and we're not looking at state boundaries when we're doing these strategy plans.
Is Alabama and Mississippi putting any funding or money into it like our agency?
They've had some. They put effort into tag fish, and they'll have to go maintain those receivers that are on the bottom. So that there is a cost there for them to have people on the water doing that. I haven't heard of any projects that they're doing to support commercial fishing yet. But at the same time, there's so few fish there that I don't think many commercial fishermen want to run around and catch, if there's not many there to catch. So it's a challenge.
Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you. Frank, the netting, the commercial fishing, is it fair to say that targets basically the silver and the big head, and it doesn't do that well on the grass carp?
I've not seen any grass carp information yet. I know that it's not very good on buffalo and some other commercial species. Not that they won't catch some of them, but it's not as good. So if they're willing to go out with that net, they're going to be targeting carp. But back to the grass carp. The grass carp have been they've been a bycatch of these efforts to catch the other carp, and frankly, people on the Ohio River, Mississippi River, and even Kentucky Lake and Barkley have been surprised that when you start setting nets for carp, how many grass carp you actually catch. So.
Yeah, the kind of the reason I'm thinking we've got a resource that could give y'all information in the state's bow fishermen. Bow fishing's becoming bigger and bigger, and you could have other people doing the work for you while eradicating that. You've got a pilot cost share program that's going on with the commercial fishermen, and I think maybe some money ought to be allocated to having some bow fishing tournaments that gets fishermen and hunters into one basket, and everybody goes out there, has a good time, gets your research, cleans up some of the stuff out of your lakes, and I'd like to see some money allocated to supporting bow fishing tournaments that help our sportsmen out while also taking care of an invasive species.
Okay.
Might hear an amen on that. No, Commissioner Cook was next.
Thank you. Frank, could you go back to the slide, one of the earlier ones with the map? So I just note, I think it was the Duck River. It looks like, there's plenty of fish upstream from this tributary, but it looks like one of the tributaries has no carp in it. And I'm just curious what's unique about that tributary. I think that's the Duck River, isn't it, on the kind of heading toward?
I don't have a mouse, but the one that's
going east to west, basically.
Yeah, east to west. Yeah,
that tributary doesn't have fish in it, which
well
upstream.
That's the Piney River, I believe, and I just asked the GIS crew to hit the highlights when they do this, because they do a very detailed work when they produce a map, and I can't get them to keep it simple.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a
Yeah.
spillway.
There's
or-
nothing special about that.
Okay, I
one.
know if it was a
We-
spillway or
and-
something that was.
And I do want to say that, you know, these carp have had ample opportunity to come up all these tributaries to the Tennessee River, and they really don't seem to come up and hang out in like way up in an Indian Creek or Horse Creek. They're in the mouth area, but they're not going on up. Now the Duck River, they've gone clear up, and they've got a lot of distance for reproduction in there. So that's one we're most worried about. But
What's-
yeah, we're interested in anything that is, once we figure out where they're spawning, we're going to be interested in anything that they need to spawn, because that'll be where we'll try to mess them up, to make sure they can spawn.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cox?
Frank, what is the, have you got a report or from the committee, the task force?
I have not. We just had the recommendation to provide the grant funds, and
Are we spending federal money or are we spending any of your state dollars?
I mentioned that ANS grant that we did, that we're about to do a budget expansion for. We actually used that money. We had that money from previous years unspent for a variety of reasons, and we had it there in that ANS budget. And so it was federal funds that passed through the agency and was matched at 25% by Harris Payment. They had to show the match on that for us.
So right now, we haven't taken any state dollars for any of this.
Well,
Or not much.
no new state dollars. It's been people's time that might normally be doing something else in the middle of winter, and now they're working on carp here and there. And so yeah, there's some expenditure, but nothing new.
I absolutely believe the market, developing a market is the only way we're gonna make any headway. What, you said developing a market and adding value, and I understand that, but I thought there was an Asian market that the demand was far exceeded the supply. What's the update with some of the processors, and how's that going? I mean, somebody even said that Tennessee didn't have enough fish for the commercial fishermen to put a facility here, but I just don't think that's right.
It's all about scale. If you want to bring in a massive facility, I had a guy call me wanted to do like a fertilizer type plant, and I forget how many tons he wanted an hour to run his plant. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. You can't do that here. But if you're willing, I think if you're wanting to, there's more demand for fish from buyers than there are people catching fish. And the reason is the buyers aren't willing to pay enough. They've got to get to that point where people are wanting to fish. But it's about the scale. I mean, I think that someone could make money at this if they were willing to get the right size and grow it, rather than trying to shake down a venture capitalist thing, wanting $15 million to come in, and they need 400,000 pounds a week to make it work financially. That's difficult. I think it could happen. There's people that have that vision. I just don't have it.
What is the market right now per pound? What are the buyers offering?
Last I heard, it was like 17 cents. If
What are
they're
the-
getting a pinch, it can be 20 cents.
What do the fishermen need to make it worthwhile for them to really be aggressive?
Higher than that?
25 cents?
I've heard 25 cents. Yeah, but as long as they can still go catch other species and make a lot more money, it's going to be tough. And the nice thing about maybe having them out there, if we can just get them going for carp, maybe they'll see that they pick up some buffalo while they're at it, and that is that helps defray their cost of their trip, and they get a little more profit margin for each outing.
Well, it seems to me that the Asian carp problem is the CWD of fisheries. And if we don't do something in the next couple of decades, we're gonna lose our sport fishery. And
Well,
that may be an
yeah.
overstatement, but not from what I've
I think the potential is there. You know, we may look back in 10 years and say, wow, they never did spawn in Kentucky Lake very well, and it's not a big problem. I can't operate that way. I'm with you. I'm assuming the worst and hoping for the best.
But it seems to me that believing that we should take a look at perhaps trying to get the market or the fishermen interested. If we subsidized 10 cents a pound,
Yeah.
we pay $100,000 for 1,000,000 pounds of fish out of the fishery. What are we going to pay for CWD if it comes? What's that going to cost us? Well, this is the same thing, and we're not allocating resources, in my opinion, enough and being aggressive enough to try to get ahead of this. We're doing the data, we're studying it, and we're trying to find out how we attack this. But we already know reduction is commercial fishing.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is that we strongly consider investing some money in trying to get ahead of this with the commercial fishermen and somehow figure out how we can deliver to the buyers or something so you don't have fraud and abuse and whatever, some incentive for the fishermen to get them to. I understand we're buying some ice makers and we're buying some nets, and that's great, but if a guy's gonna go out here and get bloody with Asian carp, they need to make a profit doing it, and we need to try to, I think, get the market going. And we can't spend $2 or $3 million, but over 5 years, $500,000 and catch 5 million pounds of fish seems like a legitimate investment.
Yeah, the incentive programs that Kentucky had tried didn't work out, but they were working with the commercial fishermen. And I think the next model that we would want to try if we got going that way would be to work with the buyers, and that way we'd only have to work with a few buyers to get the incentive delivered to the market. My thinking is that should trickle down to them. If we put a clause on them that said, we'll give you X amount of subsidy, but you have to pay a minimum amount for the fish you buy. That should deliver it to the commercial fishermen and go on from there. But we've been thinking about that. That's the kind of thing, if we got a big chunk of money, that'd probably be the next place to start.
Well, Madam Chairman, I think this deserves more discussion and perhaps taking a look at what we need to do, because I think it's incumbent on us to think of the future, and the future right now is bleak with Asian carp. So
If there's such a demand for it, why is the price so cheap? Is there an explanation there?
The demand is that people want to make a lot of money while they do it. They don't want to pay what it costs to go get them. They want them, but they don't want to pay me to go get them. It's just.
And
That's
then
the problem.
Also, back in the spring, there was a really big juvenile kill on the.
Yes.
We saw them all over the banks, and I had a lot of calls. And if you were out there fishing, you saw them. Did we draw any conclusions from what caused that?
We did, and it's the understanding is that those fish succumb to natural bacteria and parasites that are common in our lakes, and it's really not it. We thought it was new to us. When we started asking around, we found out that other states had experienced the same thing. And
They were all the same size. It was just like every one of them seemed to be the same.
Well, that's because the population in Kentucky Lake is dominated by those fish that were born in 2015.
But we don't know if they spawned there or not.
We still really we can't know for that year class. We're looking into the future now. We had hoped that if there was a big spawn in 17, that the work that our reservoir fisheries crew was doing would detect it, and they did all the work. But then it's pretty clear that there wasn't any fish spawns. So now it's hard to document something that didn't happen at the same time. So, but there's still thoughts that those fish they never really were observed until they were about yay big in the lake. If there were trillions of them below the dam and the lock open, you could bring in thousands a day. Because the Kentucky lock is one of the most heavily used locks in the southeast. I talked to the
Commissioner Stroud, do you have a question?
Frank, would you mind going to that lock picture,
Sure.
the audio thing that you're doing?
Yeah, let me zoom this way.
So while you're doing that, a question.
Yep.
Who did the research on the sonic and the sound of, is it the USGA?
It's USGS in partnership with the service. Yeah, it's them. But there's also private firms that do turnkey operations will come in and say, yeah, we can do this. And of course the price is way higher, but and they talk about deterrence. They don't talk about exclusion. Like they can't promise you 100%.
I get it.
Yeah, so that's where it gets tricky.
But it does work to a point, right?
Well, we're going to find out. I mean, they can control fish in pond settings. You know, they can make them stay away from. They can habituate them to food, tell them the food is here by ringing the bell, so to speak, and then turn that sound on, and they know the food's there. They still won't come. They run the other side of the
Okay,
pond.
a couple
so.
more questions,
Yeah.
I'll leave it on, but is there a lock that has that equipment on it yet?
Let me think. There's that one I showed the picture of,
Okay.
and that's on the Mississippi River. That's why it was really key when they said, well, we want to test one at a better spot. We said, come on down. And we were originally looking at Pickwick Lock, but because it would have been more strategic, but they didn't want to go someplace where there weren't enough fish to really test it. And we know there's a lot of fish right below Kentucky Lock.
Right.
So the hope is they'll be there for a season, say, yeah, this works. Now where do we put it?
Well, which
Yeah.
is where I'm going with this. If it works, I'm not very smart about this stuff, but if it's a frequency, and if it's underwater transducers, then we should look into doing something like that in a place like that, because it's not expensive. Don't let anybody gouge you on that kind of stuff, because I don't know a lot about, but I do know about this. And you know, it's not terribly expensive to do those kind of things, so don't let anybody tell you it is. Tell them to call
Okay.
me.
Yeah, the process has been pretty harrowing when you think about approaching the Corps of Engineers, who has authority over locks, and saying, well, we'd really like to do some work in your locks. And they
Yeah.
get a little nervous, but they're actually hosting a meeting with with our staff and others in this they're all in this problem together. They're all up at Kentucky Dam Lock right now doing a walkthrough to see what that
Right.
looks like. I'd be at that meeting if I wasn't here.
Yeah. Well, to me, you know, you find out what the frequency is, and then we can do that stuff. I'm not, I sound pretty hillbilly about this, but it
Well-
does, I don't think that's rocket science, and my point is this: if that does work, if it is a deterrent, then it's something I think that we could look into that would be beneficial to us, that wouldn't just cost an arm and a leg.
And even if it's not 100% effective, there could be places where 70% effectiveness would
Is
be
good.
useful. Reelfoot Lake's a really good example. You know, they're not going to spawn if they get in Reelfoot Lake, but if we can keep most of them out, that would keep most of the problem out of there.
Maybe a great place to test it.
It's a nice small spot, yeah.
I think Commissioner Cox. has
Frank,
another
I've got,
question.
why is it, let me back up. These fish came from the Mississippi River, correct? Came out of Arkansas.
They
to
came
the
out of
river,
Arkansas, yeah.
and
They're in
came-
Ohio.
They're
And
coming upstream from the Ohio and okay, so they're moving. Why does it make a difference if they're spawning in Kentucky Lake or Pickwick? They're obviously moving upstream. So I know it's good data to have, but why do you need it to be able to formulate a plan to do something about it? What difference
well,
does it make for spawning?
if we found out that they were spawning above in a certain reservoir, you would just assume that you could never control them below that reservoir, because you're always going to have young fish going through the dam and the gates just through the turbines. You'd never. So if you're going to put money into deterrence, there's no sense in keeping fish from migrating upstream into a system where they're already reproducing. That's the thinking.
But doesn't it make sense that they've moved from the Ohio River all the way down to almost to Wheeler, or up to Wheeler? They're either spawning or they're just migrating. I mean, they're
That's the
soon
question.
be in the Cumberland River.
Well, we know they're migrating for sure. I mean, there's just based on the sizes of the fishes that are appearing. When you only see big fish and you never saw a little fish, it's pretty likely that they swam upstream through the lock. But if we get several reservoirs with big fish, and then all of a sudden they're reproducing at the most upstream one, it really changes your ability to. There's no reason to deter them from getting up there anymore. The thinking is that you would beat them back as well while you're at it. So it does matter. It's not. It matters a lot if they're spawning heavily in one. If they get up to Wheeler and they start using, the fewer in Wheeler, if they get enough capacity in Wheeler where they start using the Elk River to spawn, and there's just, maybe Wheeler's just got just what they want, and there's tons of them there, then they're always going to be contributing downstream again to the lower lakes in numbers. So any kind of eradication effort that might focus on a spawning area in those areas would be less important. So it's just a lot of moving parts to watch. That's what we're doing.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay.
Sure.
Twice this last year, I was on the Duck River, and MTSU students was using the same ramp I do. Where are they getting, and that's what they're doing, studying these carp.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they getting their funds from to do that?
Not my office. I don't know. I knew of the work they're doing. I think they're doing something with eDNA, carp, and mussels. And there's a little bit of collaboration there between MTSU and Tennessee Tech on that front. But I haven't been in the weeds on that one.
Well, the 2 times that I talked to them, I mean, they was solely studying these carp. And I just wonder, are they sharing that information with you?
They would. No, I haven't gotten it at this point, but they're probably I think they're working on that mussel side of it to see if they're. I really don't know what their objective is. I just know that they're working on. They're concerned. It's local to them. It's a smaller project. I mean, we're aware that there's silver carp coming up the Duck River, and that image that I had up there for monitoring was us on the Duck River.
Right, but
Yeah.
but I just don't understand if they're doing studies, why they're not working with you and sharing information with each other to I mean, I just don't
that is surprising because we have Murray State is big and they show up at the meetings. There's another one out of Ohio that Purdue comes to the meetings that are doing research. So I'll look into that, make sure there's not something there that we need.
Right.
But I know they're working with Tennessee Tech on it a little bit too.
Okay.
So thank you.
Any other questions? Frank?
One
Well,
down
you've
here.
given us a lot of, oh, sorry, one more? Go ahead.
Is the people up north of us that are already inundated, are they taking this as seriously, or are they kind of throwing up their hands and know it's going downstream and not worrying about it?
No, they're still working to reduce them in states like Illinois, which was one of the first ones. They have a more mature carp program. They've got people that go out and just for different tasks. They have teams that go do different things. There's still a lot of interest. There's a lot of interest in this nationally, even though a lot of the places already have the problem. We're one of the few areas that have untouched carp water, so to speak. But that's why there's still time. But there's always this mission to keep the fish out of the Great Lakes, and that you've heard about the canal in Chicago. So there's always a funding battle every year to keep that thing going, and we're always trying to take a little bit of money away from that to get work done down here, and that's where our struggle is. There's a lot of congressional support for the Great Lakes, and there's not as much support for the rest of the basin.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, you've given us a lot of information on the containment, the deterrence, and the reduction and all like that. And we thank you. That concludes Chairman Woodson.
Okay, thank you.